Welcome to DreamHack Tonight. We are back. We had a little bit of a break and we're switching things up. Now, I've got a new guest here with me, and DreamHack Tonight for the next couple of months is going to be Nahaz and I talking about everything DreamHack Beyond, the free digital virtual gamified DreamHack experience and event we've got happening at the end of July. Nahaz, welcome to the show, dude. How have you been? I haven't talked to you in ages.
It has been way too long. I'm great. Just got done with spring term classes at Georgetown, and great group of students as usual. Had a lot of fun. So, this is how I'm spending my free time over the summer. And it's funny because you called me up. I obviously love working with you, love working with DreamHack, but I actually don't know that much about the setup here and what we're going to be talking about. So run me through what I'm hearing about this DreamHack experience.
Yeah, so we haven't had physical events for a while. And for those of you who don't know, Nahaz and I know each other through everything Dota. That's where we came from. And this talk show is pretty much nothing Dota. And so that's why Nahaz is just like, what's going on? So DreamHack Beyond is this gamified festival experience where we actually are working with a developer to create a video game that is going to a DreamHack festival. And so there are quests and there are collectible pets and unlockable t-shirts and
Super
character
cool.
customization and all that stuff. And just like at a normal DreamHack festival, we've got cosplay, we've got music, we've got BYOC tournaments, we've got indie games, we've got even tabletop that we're doing virtually. And so every week on this show, we're going to drill down into one of those different areas so that everybody kind of knows what they can look forward to. And this week, it's all about our BYOC and LAN, which I feel like is, odd when we're talking about a digital experience, but our producers have come up with some really cool stuff for it.
That's actually pretty awesome. One of the things that we talked about at the end of the semester was, we've all sort of had to do things a little bit differently for the last couple of years, and in some ways, it's forced innovation that I think is going to help when we go back to doing things in person. So some of these topics are something that things that I don't know a lot about personally, but I'm really excited to talk to you about. And I think kicking things off with building your own PC is a really good example. It's something that I have very limited experience with, but it's a topic that a lot of people have gotten into because we all have time and we're all working a lot more from home. And especially in an esports context, we're kind of the enthusiasts. We're, like it or not, we're people that get asked for advice about that.
Yeah, and I don't know if people should be asking me advice about building a PC. And it's not yet. We're not going to transition to this yet, but we do have someone who's going to help us with that. Before we jump into it, I just want to give you an overview of what the BYOC and the LAN and everything at a virtual DreamHack looks like. And so imagine this tower, all these different levels, and people who go to Beyond are going to be able to sign up to have a chance to get their own little setup within Beyond where they get to customize their entire area. It's kind of like you give them a room and they get to design it like it's their dream gaming room. And then in addition to that, we're still going to do our competition where show us your build, show us your best case mod, impress us, get to compete with that. And then one of the great things about the BYOC at DreamHack, which I actually think is why Swedish Dota players are so good, is the BYOC at DreamHack has always had tournaments for anybody to enter and compete in. And, I've got my counterparts list up in front of me. I mean, we're talking TF2, Diabolical, Hearthstone, Valorant, Griffball, Star Wars Squadrons, right? We're spanning the gambit of all of these different games for people to get that competitive experience with their friends, and just being strategic about it digitally because ping is a thing.
It's actually super cool. It's as you're describing this, it sounds like stuff that would be behind umpteen paywalls in a regular game, and here's the experience right there. And it's funny that when you mentioned the connection, that's never something that I had connected before, but it's definitely a thing that Swedish Dota players are the ones that use these little pieces of hardware like a mouse bungee that you've never freaking heard of before, and they're like, oh no, Dota players, we have their keyboard like this, and Counter-Strike players have our keyboard at an angle. And you're going, what are you talking about? But it definitely is a thing. There's a lot of little little setup related things that some of these high level players take incredibly seriously.
Yeah. And so you've heard Nahaz and I enough. Like we said, we have an expert. We have someone who actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to building a PC, getting those components together, optimizing, because, you know, building it is not the end all step. There's a lot you do after that. So we are going to welcome Kirneill to the show to kind of take us through what's going on in the world of computer PC building, optimization, and everything.
How you guys doing?
Doing good. Great, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. It's a little crazy in the PC world, but doing okay. Yep.
Yeah, so we're just going to start out with this. For people out there who are building right now, who don't know what they're doing, right, and are trying to do their first build, how hospitable is the building world at the moment?
Well, it's not an easy world to enter currently. If you're looking to build your first build, it's really tough because a lot of people want really the same parts. We see what's going on with GPUs right now and the shortage of GPUs. Even chips and like CPUs are obtaining shortages right now. So it's really tough to enter it unless you're getting, I would say, like a pre-build, or you're next to just centers that have those particular parts. But if you don't have those advantages currently, it's definitely a climb up the mountain.
And
you got to tell me, just really quickly, you got to tell me a little bit about, you were involved with CoD, right? Mm-hmm. And this was like I don't know how many people of our audience are familiar with the CoD audience, but this is a pretty dedicated console audience in particular. And you were part of the transition that they made over to the PC. Tell me a little bit about that, because that has to be a really interesting experience.
Awesome. So, as a lot of people know, Call of Duty, competitive Call of Duty, was still on, I would say, just controllers, and we were still on console. We were on PS4 last year, and this year Activision actually made the change to go on PC and take advantage of all the things that come with PC, and it was really tedious but interesting experience, I would say. I got to just help all like the Call of Duty pros before Black Ops came out. I got to help them get their setup prepared,
cool.
Know what parts do they need. If they need a dual PC setup, I got to help them with that. And yeah, it was really a learning experience. Just imagine, I would say 300, I think they have 100 million players or something like that on COD, switching all just to PC, just to get that just competitive experience and to become a pro one day. So it was really interesting. Got to work with a lot of parts and just a lot of players in general. They're awesome. And yeah, I'm finally glad that we made the change, because now instead of running on 60 hertz, we get the benefit of running on 240 hertz, which improves their skill levels. Of course, they're competitive, they're pro players, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So definitely it was an interesting change for them, and an interesting change for us as well.
Yeah, I gotta, like I said, Nahas and I come from the Dota world, and I have a lot of friends who have managed teams, and I'm sorry, but all that's in my head right now is just like babysitter. Like, you need to be paid more, you know, for babysitting that number of pros and walking them through it. This is something people don't realize. How technologically savvy would you say the average pro is?
Actually, so they are really, to start off, they're really, really smart people in general. That's one of the reasons why they became professional players in the first place. But a pro, you know, like, they have to work 8 to 10 hours a day, scrimming, streaming, doing all the other components, and I would say they didn't have the time to learn about that aspect of PCs. for example, doing a dual PC setup with all the audio and all just your microphone, your stream, your camera, all of that is a lot of time that it takes to get into it. Not just for professional players, for I would say anybody that's looking to get into just PC gaming in general. So they did need just a bit of help with that, but really they picked it up really quickly, and we got it going really fast. So I believe it was 3 days before Black Ops came out. We had to optimize almost the entire CDL because they just got their PCs due to just the PC demand and like the shortage of GPUs and stuff like that. So we had to do all of them in 3 days, and we pulled it off. So it's awesome.
That's pretty. I mean, I can only imagine the hysteria. So you were mentioning, as you get into thinking about building your own machine, just for the people out there that, you know, maybe like me are just not that tech savvy, what are sort of the big questions that you think somebody should start with as they think about what they want their setup to look like?
That's a great question.
So building a machine, just building a PC in general, is really a personal preference. I would say you need to know before you build a PC, what are you building it for? Are we building it for gaming and streaming? Are we building it for mining? So a lot of the stuff, there's a lot of differences in that. And even with gaming, what does that game or that program or software that you use like? Does it like multi-core performance? Does it like single core performance? You have to know just a little bit of that and do some research beforehand just to get into it. I would say always start with just the CPU and just the GPU, which is the graphics card in general. Those are just the two main components of a PC, of course. With the GPUs, we know how that's going right now. It's going to be a little tough. So I would say start with everything and then get during that time of gathering everything together, obtain that GPU during that time, but don't try to get a GPU first. Gather everything first and then you'll get your build sooner. Definitely with CPUs, they have shortages with that as well. No matter if you're going AMD, which took the crown this year, I would say, in gaming, and Intel, they have some of their shortages as well. But just see what your game likes. For example, on CoD, Warzone players, they need multi-core performance just because Warzone, a battle royale, takes so much resources. So basically, they need something like a 5950X, a 10900K with 10 cores, something with a high core count, and just a high gigahertz in general to pull that build off. And I would say definitely take time to do it, because a huge thing in our community that I've seen a lot in Call of Duty is that people focus too much on the GPU and they got 3090s for $1,500 when they could have used that extra $700, get a 3080, and they could have gotten an extremely good CPU that could have obtained them more frames to the end of it, because COD is CPU intensive. So I would say definitely start off with what are your objectives with the build, what are you looking to do with it, search the best parts, and definitely go from there. And do not forget about cooling. Everybody always focuses on just the aesthetics, the RGB, the flashy lights, and just the power, but cooling is one of the top most important things out of a CPU build. If you don't have cooling, you're not going to get that power, and it's not going to be good long term for you. So yeah, I mean
that's like a laptop versus a desktop build, right?
Exactly.
Like a laptop just can't do as much because it can't cool. Exactly. And so the other thing I wanted to throw out there, because you mentioned this with graphics cards and CPUs, I think what people don't realize is if your CPU can't keep up with your card and your card is throwing frames and the CPU is like, oh my gosh, I just can't handle this. it also impacts your performance. That's why you'll see people who got 3080s, but in an older build, they'll actually upgrade their monitor. They'll go to like a 4K or 1440p monitor, and suddenly their performance improves because the CPU is not bottlenecked anymore because the graphics card actually has to work hard. And it's really funny to see that, like, there's that level there. You think, oh, if I upgrade this part, everything gets better. But if you bottleneck the rest of your system,
Right.
Exactly. And that's a really common phenomenon, especially in just COD, especially currently. A lot of people, they didn't focus on RAM, CPU. They just basically, a lot of people upgraded, which is upgraded their parts and just upgraded the GPU in general. And the whole other part of the systems, the CPU, the cooling, everything, that even just the power supply, just bottlenecks everything. They still get the same performance, and they ask, why am I still getting the same performance? So definitely I would say it's a balance to it when you're trying to build a PC.
Nahaz, are you feeling ready to build?
Let's get into, so when you say cooling, what are the considerations there? Is it more a function of what you want the machine to do? Is there a consideration of the space? Like, I have a smaller office that tends to get pretty hot, and I have my tower in a position where I'm not necessarily getting the best airflow. What are you thinking about in that direction?
So cooling is a just component of just three parts, of course: the space you're in, just the airflow in general and how it goes through just the system in general, and of course there is just water cooling in general, which is becoming a common phenomenon currently. And I would say for cooling, always go with an AIO or just a water cooled AIO for your CPU, so it could pull out that maximum performance. A lot of what's happening now is a lot of CPUs currently are becoming extremely good. AMD released a 5950X 16 cores, and it gets toasty. It gets really toasty. So with a really good AIO or just really good cooling on that 5950X, it can show you the beauty of its performance. But without really good cooling and really good just airflow in general, it's gonna just bottleneck just the performance of your CPU and the longevity as well. So
yeah,
I like that point.
Nahaz and I have a friend who does a lot of CPU advice in the Dota Esports world. And one of his big things he yells at people for, I mean, he gets animated about this, is he tells people to stop using the phrase future proofing. There is no such thing as future proofing. Like get what works now and upgrade later. Don't buy the most expensive part, kind of thing. And I want to see, like, you can get animated on that too. You know, do you have the same frustrations?
Yes, because so basically what I do is just basically optimize people's PCs, and the most common question I get is, for this PC, how can I make it future proof, and how can I not buy a PC in like 5 to 10 years? Because they want it new. You're spending a lot of money on it. It's a huge investment. But I have to tell everybody that as soon as you get that PC, there is the next week, the next month, there's going to be a new part out, and it's
like
just
driving the new car off the lot.
Exactly. It's not like consoles where we get it every 5 to 7 years. It's a brand new experience. There's new RAM out. There's a new CPU coming out. But I just got my GPU. Oh, there's a new 3080 Ti coming out. So basically, never try to future-proof it. Again, go with what your budget holds. Go with just a balanced build and just build what's right for you at this time. You can never see what's coming in the future, and I would say just don't halter yourself, because you're gonna get into that situation where, oh, I need to get the 3080 Ti, but the 3090 Ti is coming out. Oh, I need to get that. And it keeps going. I think
it's a form of FOMO, right? Everybody's like, well, the next big thing's coming. I should. I really like, though, in talking about this advice, I think a lot of times when I talk to people about stuff like this, everybody has like their favorite build and and I like that you're keeping the conversation general, that you're saying, look, specialize to what you're doing. What are the big mistakes that you see people making? I know we've talked about bottlenecking a little bit, and we've talked about GPU versus CPU, but what do you think are like the 3 or 4 most common mistakes you see people making when they approach this?
Okay, so the biggest mistakes when it comes to PC builds, the first one, of course, would be they don't buy the PC based off what they need. They buy it based off what's marketed to them or what they see people having. And that's not only for PC builds, that's for anything, right? So basically, a lot of console players from Call of Duty that switched over to PC, they didn't research the game and what the game needs, and they thought it was a traditional PC game where it needs a ton of GPU and it doesn't need your CPU at all. But for us, for example, a lot of people are getting low frames because, of course, COD's CPU intensive. So they made that mistake of not researching about the parts they need and what that program needs, and they're not happy to the end of it. And it's really sad because it's a huge investment. Number 2 is they focus too much on just the aesthetics and not the performance, or just the other way around, you know what I mean? So there's a little balance to it that you can do. When you focus on just the RGB and the lighting and stuff like that, it's really cool. I even have like RGB and stuff like that, but I know as just a builder that I'm sacrificing performance just for that aesthetic look. This AIO that I have is a Z73. I could have got a Arctic Freeze or something like that that gives me that little edge and boost and that little edge in performance that could have ultimately led me to become a better player, you know what I mean? But obviously a lot of people like fall for just the RGBs and what looks the nicest and stuff like that. The third thing I would say is a lot of people spend outside of their budget, and budget is a huge thing when it comes to PC building because it's getting crazy. I cannot name how many thousands I've seen gone just from PC builds itself, because you might be thinking of the PC build and you're spending your whole entire budget on that. But if you're looking to become a full-time streamer, for example, what about your camera? What about your lighting? What about your audio? There's a lot more to it than the PC itself. So I would definitely say spend your budget wisely, even with the PC parts. Most people spend, again, $1,500 on a 3090. They could buy a whole all the other parts of their PC with that extra $700 if they just went with a 3080. So there's a balance in budget with that you really gotta stick to, and it's really hard for us gamers to stick to budget because we're just like, oh, we need the best and the maximum.
I like the way you're talking about this, but I'm curious, what would be the number that you have in mind? Let's just suppose, to give you something concrete, let's just suppose that I'm a mid-level org and I have a number of people, I have a number of COD players that are pretty high level, maybe a pro team, but I also know that some of the value I'm getting is I want my players to have the option of streaming. What's a number that you would have in mind for me in terms of what is each system going to cost? That I want to forget the monitors for a second. Just what's the basic PC going to cost, do you think? What would you recommend?
This actually happened earlier in this year. I got that exact same question from an actual org for Call of Duty. Basically, I would say the number right now for competitive players to stream and game, I would say it's around the 4 to 5K range. In terms of, yes, it's ridiculous.
No way.
You can get cheaper, of course, but to get that maximum performance, to make sure your players can play comfortably without just stuff happening to the PC and stuff like that, you really want to invest in what equipment they're using. So I would say go with a 3080, 5950X, or 10900K, just so to be safe.
How much does that number change if I were to say that this is a high level player but not a pro? This is somebody that is, as an individual, looking to build a system that is planning on playing at the high level, but wants 90% of that performance without the big 4 to 5K price tag. How low can you go there while maintaining most of the attractive features of the system that you just mentioned.
Is that with or without the streaming? Because
streaming that's
is
another
actually
thing I wanted to ask, by the way.
Streaming adds a significant tax, and if you're streaming, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is from what I understand. If you're streaming, you want an Nvidia GPU. If you're not streaming, you can move over to AMD, and then you can have AMD CPU and GPU, activate rage mode, have smart access memory. Like, there's a whole bunch of synergies that come from a full AMD build right now that are really great, but the encoding on an Nvidia card for streaming, huge difference. It's massive. And so for your question, it's actually really important. Are they a high-level player who wants to play well but aren't competing? Or are they a streamer?
Got it.
Because that's a really big divide on cost right there.
I actually, I mean, if we have time, I'd actually kind of like to hear both, because that's one thing that I don't understand very well is exactly what's the cost differential stepping up from somebody that really wants to be good at the game, wants to play at the highest level, and then also then maybe have the option of streaming. What kind of differential are we looking at there?
So, in terms of that question, let's start with just a player trying to play at the highest level, period, right? And they're not concerned about streaming, even though you should, as build up your name for yourself. Like that. As a player just trying to get a system for performance, I would say the budget range is a little more friendly to you, because you could switch over, of course, to AMD GPUs, and you can probably pull out a really nice build in terms of just, I would say, Call of Duty in general. Around you could squeeze in the 2,000 range to 3,500 range if you're trying to squeeze in that just performance aspect, period. Because you could go with just a cheaper AMD GPU or just a cheaper Nvidia GPU in general. You don't have to get a 3080, a 3070. You could go with a 2080 Super. So you can get previous gen builds and it can still be really good for you. Now, if you're a player trying to make a name for yourself and want the maximum performance, it's go big or go home. Because basically that NVENC encoder is huge when it comes to streaming, and it does take a toll in terms of just the memory performance of the GPU.
That NVENC encoder he's talking about is what I was saying, is an NVIDIA card. NVENC is their encoding software that makes a difference.
Is COD relative to the other competitive titles? Do you think COD is at the upper end of the range or fairly typical? Like if I were talking about League or Dota instead, would I be talking about more in the like 1,500 range? Yeah, I think a lot lower, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. This is like I love it.
I used a 750 for Dota for years.
Oh God. Okay. Yeah, I know from some of the mutual friend that Nessa was talking about earlier. I know from some of the stuff that he said that if you a lot of these esports that have been around for a while, that you can get by with something even in the $1,200 range and be running it buttery smooth. But yeah, I know COD's a bit more resource intensive, it sounds like.
Exactly, and it goes back to the aspect of just balance and just budget. Just because COD prefers just that multi-core performance, and it takes almost everything out of your system to run the game in general. For something like League of Legends or Dota, it would be really user-friendly to obtain just a PC that way, because you could get one for $1,500, $2,000 for a really good one, and you could be able to like stream on it as well if you wanted to, if you had an Nvidia GPU. So, yep.
Yeah, I think this is a really useful kind of advice for people, because this is, I think, a mistake that I make all the time is I just look at something and I want something that I can use for the next 5 years, and it's buy for what you need right now, and if your needs change, if your stream blows up or something, that's a good thing. You'll be wanting to buy a new PC anyway.
One of the really cool things that Kirnell's talking about what's using multi-cores too, this is really important that I don't think people realize. When a game is built for console, traditionally, consoles have better multi-core optimization. Games that
Oh,
are
really?
built for PC for a long time. It's fixed now. It's better now. But for a long time, games that were built for PC were single core, which is why Intel has
Oh,
always
sure.
dominated the PC market, because Intel has better single core
Sure.
than AMD.
Exactly.
It is only very recently that AMD single cores have improved, and the way that developers are building games is multi-core now. That's why AMD actually competes on the market now. That's why I switched to AMD.
That's interesting. I would have, when you first were saying that, I would have thought it would be the other way around. But then you think about, in the past, most developers were much more dedicated. There was much fewer crossover titles in the past than there are now, and so you had people developing for PC and people developing for console that just were completely disjoint. So it's an interesting point. I really like that.
So I'm gonna switch the topic a little bit right now, because one of the things we have at Beyond and we have at every DreamHack are these. Depends on if you're in North America or in Sweden or in a different country what they call it, but essentially case mod, PC builder championship, etc., where people make the wildest builds. They'll build a case out of Legos and their PC is inside of that. They'll 3D print a giant PlayStation and build inside of that, right? We saw some really cool ones for Cyberpunk before when we had event, etc. So I want to know from Kirneill, right? You optimize. I know this isn't like, you're the modding the outside of the case world, but if you were going to build like that dream PC and that insane case and everything, what are you building it as? Like, what is it taking the shape of?
So if I was to build my dream PC, just with aesthetics and everything, it would really take a lot because it would take a lot in terms of creativity, skills, money, and especially just a 3D printer. 3D printers can go up from $1,500 to $130,000. So it depends on a lot of just different aspects in general and what you're trying to do. You really have to think of, let's say, the material. Do you want to
build what's your dream though? Like what does yours look like?
If
is it like
so? Tell me about your PC.
Yeah. Like would it be like a Bugatti with Mario sitting in it, and you like open the door and like you get to see your graphics card? What's it look like?
So if I were to build just a PC that I could literally just do anything for, I would probably go with what Linus was doing just earlier this year with the triangular pyramid themed completely metallic build, and it, oh my god, just amazing. The material is really hard to get, and just the machinery is really hard to get, but I would go with that with a little more RGB aesthetics on the side, and just literally just max it out. SLI 3090, even though that doesn't really make that much of a difference, gotta do it anyway.
Of course,
go
stat
with
points.
Exactly,
a 5950X 16 core AMD. Literally just max out everything and just create just a machinery, just a machine just sitting in the corner of my room. Yeah,
that's cool.
All right, Nahaz, what would you want yours to look like? What would be the dream?
Well, I mean, if there's some way to make Invoker with the, Quackflex and Exort orbs, I'm so down. I don't know if this is happening, but exactly. I mean, yeah.
I couldn't resist. Okay, I
mean, really, like if there is, if I can make a meteor case, I'm there. I'm absolutely there.
Oh gosh, that would be awesome. So Invoker's a Dota 2 character that has 3 orbs that float around him, and depending on the color of the orbs depends on what spell he casts.
It's a bunch of different spells, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a famous clip of Nahaz I'm referencing that we don't need to go any further into, but it does not surprise me that that's what he picked. Oh gosh, but these things aren't ridiculous. These are things we see people bring to our shows. It's wild. So it's, maybe we'll see a pyramid or an Invoker with meteors to tempt Nahaz at the next show. You never know.
Hey, that's what's one of the best things about gaming, though, is that you see types of creativity that I don't think you encounter anywhere else. I really love these forms of geeky creativity because it's a form of expression that's completely unique to the gaming space, and something that Kirneill said earlier, which really resonated with me, is that these players are really, the people that you meet at LAN events overall are actually like really smart, and it's super cool to be in a space with people that have that intelligence and have that passion and want to showcase their creativity in ways like that.
It's something we definitely miss from physical events. I think we all miss them. I mean, that's why I'm excited for DreamHack Beyond. I know that's the whole purpose of the show, so I'm going to keep peddling it. But it's going to kind of give us a way to get a little taste of that until we actually, get back to physical events. I'm trying to think of my favorite ones I've seen. You guys have answers for what you want to build, and I have no idea. I'm like, I don't know. I want it to look like bacon, or...
That's a good one.
I mean,
that's all that came to mind.
That works.
You can never go wrong with bacon, really.
But the problem is, I think I'd be hungry all the time. So my PC sits right here, and it's pretty. I mean, I love it. I went full out on the RGB. I got the colored AIO, and my RAM is RGB too. It's a whole thing.
Oh my god! Really?
But I'll send you a picture.
That's pretty cool.
It was a saga. We built 3 or 4 computers over the course of a few days, and let me tell you. So there's this thing. This is going to be a sidetrack, but the whole point of this podcast was to nerd about a PC building. There is something that you do with AMD boards. It's a BIOS flash, right? Because the board doesn't always match the CPU. And so I got the 5800X, and my board is, I don't remember, but it definitely came out a little before the 5800X, so that the BIOS on it was one or two too old to work with the CPU. So I tried to do the BIOS flash, and it was the most frustrating thing in existence. You're supposed to just plug in a USB and it works, and it's a PC build, so of course it doesn't work. And I mentioned it earlier, Nahaz, but like I said, when you have an AMD CPU and GPU, there's something called rage mode. It's like all caps, and they all work together. And the other person's comment while we were building was, "Hey, look, you activated rage mode without even having the AMD GPU," because of all of the issues we were having getting the CPU to work. And I was like,
"Wow, that's."
Yeah,
it's good, but it's a little hitting below the belt. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, thanks. And I ended up having to get help from an Intel engineer to get my AMD build to work. So that wasn't embarrassing at all. But that's a little note out there that was my, I don't know, 3rd or 4th build. I've been messing around with my PC for like 7 or 8 years at this point, and that was frustrating. So it's not to discourage first-time builders, but my goodness, do things never always go right.
Yeah. I guess if I had to give advice, it would be, so I've only built my own once, and it was like 10 years ago. And the best piece of advice I could give was like, just have like a YouTube video open and watch somebody else do it, because there's all this bullshit about like, you'll have put the motherboard in the case and realize there's stuff that you still need to set, and it's just so much easier if you know the right order of operations. It becomes like the difference between kind of a fun afternoon and just wanting to tear your hair out, right?
Oh, this is okay, Kirneill.
There's so many little things.
This is a question for the case headers, right? The case headers for the little USB port and everything at the front. How many times have those been the death of you?
Oh, jeez. It's just because, oh, jeez. So basically, and I even had my problem with mine. My case header used to flicker just a tad bit, and it was just, where do I plug it into the actual motherboard? How does it get power? It's really, really interesting to see how it works. And especially if you plug in like something like an Elgato or something that uses a lot of resources, it gets wild. So if you can, try to plug stuff into just the actual motherboard specifically instead of the case headers first. A lot of the times they still work, but they can be a little finicky sometimes. Yep.
Oh yeah, no. On my PC, if I plug in the case header, the PC won't start. So we don't touch it, and those don't work, and we leave it alone. And it's just how that works. But I want to thank you, Kirneill. All the insight, that was really great. I think you have a lot of really good advice for people looking to build. And listen, streamers, pros, wannabe pros, listen to this man, okay?
Yeah,
if you're playing
10 out of 10.
competitive games, look at your CPU. If you're playing AAA games and streaming, buy an Nvidia card and still look at your CPU.
Yep.
It's very important lessons that a lot of people don't realize. But before we let you go, I just want to say, what shout-outs do you have? Where can people find you? How can they support you? Where do they get more of this advice and you yell at them not to future-proof?
So you can definitely follow me on Twitter at Kirneill, Kirneill. And if they ever want just an optimization or help just building their build in general, or just to ask about parts, we definitely help with that at Sense Quality, at sensequality.com, and on Twitter as well. So definitely you could give us a call and we'll definitely get it taken care of for you.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. And, I look forward to, seeing everybody flock to you and get more advice and spread this stop future-proofing message everywhere. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Oh, goodness. Now, Haz, did you learn something?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really good advice overall, that the different titles, you're really looking for a very different resource distribution, and you can almost always find advice from somebody in your game, in your community, that I think is going to be pretty darn good.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Kirneill, obviously his specialty is Call of Duty, but as soon as you said League of Legends or Dota, he was like, "Oh yeah, no, much cheaper. You're fine."
Yep. No, and I think that's important because a lot of people will, will look at their favorite YouTuber or their favorite esports pro and say, I want the system that they have. But if they're playing a different game from you, that's not going to make sense. And so that's why I thought the advice that Kirneill gave was so good.
Mm-hmm. Now, Haz, what are you running right now? What are your specs?
I'm very standard, 2080 Super Intel build from, would have been high end last generation, I think, but it's served me really well. I mean, I play a lot of AAA titles at close to max settings, and I haven't, I wanted a 3080, but haven't lost any sleep over the inability to get one.
Yeah, it's certainly a struggle, and we didn't really touch on that too much, but I'm sure anybody looking to build is kind of familiar with that. But I think this was a lot of fun. I really liked learn about all of that, getting to meet Kirneill. I didn't know about him before this, and everybody on Twitter was like, "You have to talk to this guy. This will be great," and it was. So it was fun, and I hope everybody watching enjoyed. Now, do you know what our topic is next week?
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to it because some of the comments that we made, even in this discussion, I think one of the coolest parts about the gaming community in general is that you get forms of creative expression that you don't really see anywhere else. And I think our topic next week, which is near and dear to your heart, is definitely one of those.
Yeah, so for everyone watching, this was our touch on, BYOC. There's tournaments, there's PC building competitions, there's a virtual LAN tower and everything happening at DreamHack Beyond. Next week is my world. We're gonna be talking about everything cosplay and getting as creative as we can and talking about what goes into cosplay, what are the popular ones out there right now, what kind of opportunities is Beyond gonna have So make sure you tune in next week to learn all about that. And if you're curious about DreamHack Beyond, it is a free, open to everyone, virtual, digital, gamified DreamHack experience. You can learn more about it at dreamhack.com/beyond. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then you can even see a trailer for the event that is happening July 24th to 31st. Nahaz, I'm so excited to have you on this project. Where can people find you?
I'm excited to be here.
If they want to hear more about you, where can people find you? Because this is your first show with us and they may not know.
You can find me on Twitter at @NahazDota. And yep, the Dota's still there. I'm still a Dota guy. But that's my major outlet. My Instagram consists mostly of cat pics, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
No, it's great. I enjoy seeing the cat pictures, so it works out well. And I'm Renessa. You can find me on all platforms at Renessa Gaming, because I may be Dota through and through, but I try and hide it a little bit. And if you want to go ahead and drop a comment and let us know what build you're rolling with or what your dream build is, we love to go through and read those comments. Otherwise, we will see you next week on The Tonight Show with everything cosplay at DreamHack Beyond.
Awesome.